Hello there, I'm Kamal Santa Maria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, a weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, we're all at sea. The Middle East gears up to spend billions defending the world's vital shipping lanes. We're going to visit a maritime defence exhibition here in Doha to see how. While not far away in Dubai, the busy waterfront is Iran's gateway through international sanctions. So what price a clampdown here on the Islamic Republic? And the heart of Venezuela's energy crisis, is it the hand of God or indeed the hand of man? Well, despite the recession, or at least the after effects of it, navies in the Middle East and North Africa are spending billions of dollars upgrading their kit, as it were. This region is just so important because it meets the world's huge demand for oil and gas. And once that is in any sort of doubt, financial chaos, especially on the energy markets, usually ensues. Have a look at it on the map because it'll give you an idea of what's what and what's where. This is the critical area, the Strait of Hormuz, which at its narrowest point is just 21 miles across, separating Oman and Iran. Just 21 miles to push through about 40% of the world's oil, which leaves this region. So the key player, of course, is Iran, a country which has threatened to close the strait in the event of a military attack, which is sanctioned over its nuclear ambitions, but has still managed to build its own navy vessels. And have a look at what other regional powers are spending as well. According to the naval market analyst AMI International, more than $30 billion is earmarked for the next 20 years in this part of the world. Just a drop in the ocean, though, really. The US manages to put aside some $265 billion for the same period. Asia Pacific, that includes China and India, they're looking at around $170 billion, all up. The global maritime defence market over the next 2 decades is valued at almost $700 billion. But naval spending is not just about fighting wars, it's also about protecting trade routes. Think about this, 75% of the world's trade passes through the Indian Ocean, where in the last year there were more than 400 attacks on the shipping industry. Putting all of this together for us this week, Charles Stratford, our man out and about at the Doha Maritime Defence Exhibition.
HMS St Albans sailing into Doha port, one of more than a dozen warships mooring in Qatar on a maritime marketing mission. More money is being spent in the Middle East on naval defence than ever before. Expected investment of over $31 billion in the next 20 years. That's up around 25% on the previous estimate, according to naval market analysts.
We've seen declines in Europe, flat budgets in the US, certainly some declines in other places. And in contrast, here in the Middle East and North Africa, we've seen growth, sustained spending on modern equipment, and continued investment in naval capabilities, which makes this market stand out from many others in the world.
Both old and new security fears are fueling the spending spree.
Focus, as you might understand, is on capabilities that can give you the anti-piracy, the anti-terrorism sorts of missions, and those are being packaged in platforms like frigates and corvettes, and the Corvette is the platform of choice. Larger than a patrol vessel, has some robust helicopter and missile capabilities, but nonetheless is small enough and quick enough to keep up with pirates and other sorts of high-speed threats.
Around 16 million barrels of oil sail through the region every day, and heightened tension with Iran feeds fear of a perceived threat. This is Pakistan's newest submarine, and the only navy in the region to have torpedo-firing hardware like this is Iran. And territorial disputes also mean big spending by countries with major cash at hand.
The disputes between nations, which may be surprising, bearing in mind that the Gulf Cooperation Council exists and the nations that are parts of that are in that sense allies, but they have territorial disputes. And then of course there is the fact that the oil provides a great deal of money that can fund this.
More than 200 piracy attacks off the Gulf of Aden last year sees kit like this unmanned surveillance helicopter flying off the shelves. The region's navies are investing heavily in intelligence gathering equipment, communication gear and serious firepower. And there are some pretty unorthodox weapons on offer too.
Now this may look like a regular marine container, but if we flip the lid, up to 4 missiles can be fired to a range of 300 kilometres, and the makers say it can be used from ships or land.
This system will be of great interest for this region because here are many countries, big countries and small countries, and for small countries it will be very beneficial. So it would be great because we can ensure peace actually in the Persian Gulf.
The persuasive language of an arms dealer hard at work in the heart of this Middle East buyer's market. Charles Stratford, Al Jazeera, Doha.
But how do you buy when the international community doesn't want you to? Talking Iran, of course, and not just the big military hardware, but the basics of trade and commerce. Now, to get around the sanctions and restrictions, Iran has a backdoor: Dubai. Around 8,000 Iranian businesses are based there, some of which are already the focus of Western restrictions. Restrictions they won't want tightened any further. From Dubai, Dan Nolan.
Dubai Creek Wharf is bustling on this steamy morning as more than 150 boats clog the waterway looking for a spot to load. Workers pack the traditional vessels known as dhows with everything from refrigerators to air conditioners, containers full of chemicals, air compressors, even US brand freezers. All of this bound for the same destination, Iran.
It's quite staggering just how much is exported to Iran from Dubai every day in what is a fairly unregulated manner. There are only two very small customs officers at either end of this wharf who are supposed to stay across everything that's in these boxes. There's no X-ray machines to check, just a manifest with what the shipping agent says is in them.
On the same busy street running right beside the loading area is another example of why Dubai is known as Tehran's back door to the West. Bank Melli has been blacklisted by the US Treasury Department for allegedly funding Iran's nuclear program. It's one of an estimated 8,000 Iranian businesses operating in Dubai.
Dubai remains a key conduit for all kinds of goods entering Iran, both goods that are explicitly illicit, dual use, things that could be used for a nuclear program, for example, and other goods that are not illicit except that they are being shipped in violation of UN Security Council resolutions.
Matthew Levitt is a former undersecretary at the US Treasury Department and says despite some obvious loopholes, Dubai's authorities are finally cracking down on Iran's ability to bypass sanctions, thanks to increased pressure from the US as well as neighbouring emirate Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi takes a harder line on this issue than Dubai does, and I think that it's definitely the case that Abu Dhabi's leverage over Dubai has increased dramatically with the Abu Dhabi bailout.
Masoum Zadeh is one Iranian trader feeling the pressure, but says the crackdown is affecting all businesses, not just those linked to Iran's nuclear program or Revolutionary Guard.
They are hurting the individuals, whether they are in Iran, in Dubai as a traders, or they are in Iran as a final end users.
Masoum Zadeh says many United Arab Emirates citizens are of Iranian descent, which is one of the reasons why there's been centuries of trade between the two nations that in 2009 reached $12 billion. Most of these household products in Tehran were shipped from Dubai, an economic link set to be severely tested as the West pushes for another round of even tougher sanctions. Dan Nolan, Al Jazeera, Dubai.
All right, so what have we seen so far? The Middle East, it's a security hotbed, and through that hotbed passes a lot of trade, certainly a lot of oil, which would be a good reason why US President Barack Obama has ended a 20-year-old ban on offshore drilling and authorised more oil and gas exploration off the US coast. See, there's up to 40 billion barrels of the stuff in areas of the Atlantic Ocean, Gulf of Mexico, probably enough to meet US demand for about 4 years. Environmental groups say it's a betrayal, but Obama may be gambling that opening up the coast to drilling would bring him more Republican support. With more on all of that, Anand Naidu.
Drill, baby, drill!
That was the war cry adopted by Republicans during the 2008 presidential campaign. When it came to oil exploration, they wanted few or no limits on where oil companies could drill. Barack Obama, however, took the opposite view. He wanted the 20-year ban on offshore drilling to remain in place. But then the question became an election issue, and candidate Obama modified his view. His announcement on Wednesday was a reflection of that change.
So today we're announcing the expansion of offshore oil and gas exploration, but in ways that balance the need to harness domestic energy resources and the need to protect America's natural resources.
And for the president, it certainly is a tough balancing act. On the one hand, he wants to placate opposition Republicans, whose support he wants for a comprehensive climate change and energy legislation bill. On the other, he's also trying to keep the environmental lobby on board by continuing the ban on drilling off the West Coast and some parts of Alaska. In the end, he may have pleased neither. Leading Republicans said they welcomed the announcement, but complained that the president did not go far enough. And environmentalists said it wasn't a smart move when one considered what the president was trying to achieve. Under the plan proposed by the administration, drilling would be allowed in an area off the Virginia coast, in the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico, and Cook Inlet off the Alaskan coast. The new proposals reverse a 20-year ban on offshore drilling and would adopt much of the plan initially put forward by the Bush administration towards the end of its time in office, especially drilling off the Atlantic coast and the Arctic. It could be years before drilling for oil starts, if at all, and the government's own projections say the new drilling will have a tiny impact on fuel prices for Americans. The United States' reliance on foreign oil won't change. Anand Naidu, Al Jazeera, Washington.
When counting the cost, returns were in the sky, and a fat tax. Why Air France is forcing obese people to pay for 2 seats, and the financial and social repercussions of that. Welcome back to Counting the Cost, your weekly business stop here on Al Jazeera. We're off to South America now, Venezuela actually, which is suffering through something of an energy crisis. See, the country depends heavily on just one hydroelectric dam, and water levels there have fallen dramatically. That's led to dozens of businesses having their power cut off for 24 hours for failing to conserve that precious energy. But what is the crux of it all? Is it drought, as President Hugo Chavez says, or illegal mining near the watershed that feeds that dam? Monica Villamizar has been finding out.
Venezuela's energy crisis originates here, the Guri Dam, which powers 2/3 of the country.
This is one of the largest dams in the world, and the water levels are historically low. Some have predicted that if consumption is not reduced and it doesn't rain very soon, the situation could be very bleak.
The government blames drought conditions for the disappearing waters. But deep in the jungle, in the heart of Venezuela's gold country, there are greater problems that rain won't solve. Bruno Rashley says in 37 years, he has never seen such devastation as illegal mining takes its toll on the rainforest.
Historically, many came to El Dorado, or the Golden City in Spanish, to search for gold. Sometimes it is found buried under the ground, like in this mine we're going to see.
He can only produce a fraction of the profits from this gold vein. But he says corrupt government officials still want a percentage of the gains.
Every ministry takes bribes. That's the law of the land here. I want to be very clear. I'm upset with this system because at the very least, I comply with every environmental regulation.
And there are many here that don't play by the rules. And illegal mines are everywhere. Water pumped in at high pressure creates giant holes where mercury is dropped to help the gold clump together. The silt returns to the watershed where it accumulates and dries up local rivers, which are the lifeblood of the Guri Dam. Trees are burnt to make room for new mines, and without trees, rainfall does not filter underground to be released during the dry season. Experts contend that it's human activity that is the main culprit in the Venezuelan energy crisis. It's a charge we put to the country's environment minister.
It's nonsense. The silt accumulation is not the problem. Our problem is the drought, and as water levels decrease, the generators on the top floor are affected.
The mining area is just miles away from what many considered one of the most beautiful places on Earth, the Canaima Reserve, home to the storied Angel Falls. At night, we are shown the gold that was mined that day, 3 grams, worth around $100. A small gain when held against the millions affected by the country's power shortage. Monica Villamizar, Al Jazeera, El Dorado, Venezuela.
To Malaysia, where the Prime Minister's outlined his economic vision for the country, nothing remarkable in itself, but perhaps what was his vow to address a feeling of exclusion felt by Malaysia's ethnic Chinese and Indian communities. Critics have called for the removal of Malaysia's race-based policies, which have made many Malays reliant on the state and indeed forced many Chinese and Indians to leave in search of greener pastures. Laura Kyle has their story.
Shireen Ong left Malaysia 6 years ago. Now in Hong Kong, she's one of hundreds of thousands of highly educated Malaysians who've abandoned their country.
I have no plans to return to Malaysia, not anytime in the near future. But what would make me return is maybe when all Malaysians are treated equally.
Many of the more than 300,000 Malaysians who left between 2008 and 2009 are ethnic Chinese, who, along with ethnic Indians, have felt discriminated against for decades. The source of this is the government's new economic policy, designed to boost the status of majority Bumiputras or ethnic Malays. They make up more than 50% of Malaysia's population, and the NEP has for 40 years given Malays, regardless of their income, advantages in housing, education and employment. Malay pressure groups scorn suggestions that this makes Malaysia a racist country.
If they say that, oh, we feel we are second-class citizen, don't talk shit. Nah, I tell you. You see, don't talk shit. I repeat, don't talk shit 3 times. We the Malays have forgive a lot of things to these people. We have sacrificed a lot of our interests.
But a growing number of Malays think the NEP is no longer needed, that it feeds a culture of nepotism and corruption. Political scientist Farish Noor is one of them. He says the rise in ethnic and religious-based politics impinges on his academic freedoms and stifles Malaysia's development.
If the conditions have changed to such a point where I can't even research and I can't even teach in peace, or I'm told that some topics are of such sensitivity that they can't be taught or critically researched, then I think, well, academic work really, hits a hard wall.
Prime Minister Najib Razak announced changes to the new economic policy, but few expect a major overhaul, even though his campaign to promote One Malaysia appears on every street corner. This is a make or break moment for Malaysia. The country needs to change direction and it needs the best brains to do it. The NEP has become more of a hindrance than a help. Set up by the current Prime Minister's own father, it should be Najib himself who dismantles it. But it will require some deft political manoeuvring, and few here believe that One Malaysia is about to become a reality. Laura Kyle, Al Jazeera, Kuala Lumpur.
And finally to Europe, where Air France has taken one of those steps you just know is going to have all sorts of ramifications, both social and financial. Short story right now is, if you're too big, you've got to buy 2 seats. And that is a move which has sparked accusations of the airline imposing a fat tax. Air France itself, though, says it'll mean larger passengers can travel in both comfort and safety. Estelle Youssoufa has this report from Paris, and keep an eye out for her seat demonstration. It'll help you make up your own mind about what Air France is doing.
Too big to fit into the seat? Buy 2, says Air France. From now on, those deemed obese who decide to fly with the French airline will be asked to buy 2 tickets, or they won't be allowed on board for safety reasons.
We don't make profit on the back of heavy people. We just make sure that they will travel safely and in comfort. Heavy people, or as we should say high body mass people, they can hardly fly 8, 9, 10 hours, sometimes more on the flight, being compressed in the armrest of the seat.
Air France says the change is required to comply with international safety rules by which airlines must ensure their passengers can clear an aircraft in an emergency in 90 seconds. In 2005, an Air France flight crash-landed in Toronto. During the evacuation, a plus-size passenger had difficulty getting out of his seat, and crew members struggled to free him from the burning plane. The security scare prompted Air France to act. Regulations also require that passengers should be able to fasten their seatbelts on board. This is a maximum size of a seatbelt in an aircraft, but there is a trick. Should a bigger person decide to occupy 2 seats, a stewardess can actually extend the safety belt to this size to allow that person to travel and respect all the safety measures. Air France says the 75% extra charge for the second seat will only apply on flights that are fully booked. Passengers will get their money back on flights with spare seats available. But the new fare policy has outraged some, who say it is simple discrimination.
They cannot afford to pay 2 seats, so it is very unfair. So we recommend that something should be found, like bigger seats, to allow those bigger people to travel. And I would like to add that now in France, people are a bit taller and a bit wider than they used to be 50 years ago. But the seats in the planes are smaller, so this is not logical.
While Westerners are getting bigger and bigger, France remains a slim nation. But obesity is a health problem that is affecting approximately 120,000 people in the country. And the Air France tickets controversy is generating mixed reactions.
I think it's shameful. You shouldn't charge people more because they're fatter. People with special needs don't get charged more. They have special seats for them. So I think they should have the same for obese people.
If they need 2 seats, then I think they should maybe pay for 2 seats. But if they can fit in the 1 seat, then they should pay the same price as everybody else.
2 years ago, a court decision in Canada ruled that airlines cannot penalize people who need an extra seat by charging them 2 fares. It's the only country with such a law. Air France says it's already sold a few hundred pairs of seats for obese passengers. They say the market is responding well to their new offer. Estelle Youssoufa, Al Jazeera, Paris.
Don't forget, counting the cost online. Here's our main page. You get there via the programs link from the front page at aljazeera.net/English. My weekly blog goes up there along with previous editions of the show. And we're on Twitter as well, where you can keep up with what's coming on next week's show. Had some great suggestions, very nice comments as well from some of our followers. At AJ Counting Cost is the name to look out for on Twitter. But that is it from Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santa Maria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.